Today, I want to tell you the story of how my own son looked me in the eyes and took away every ounce of dignity I thought I still had left. After my husband passed, when my heart was already raw and broken, he stared at me with a smirk that told me I was nothing. His wife stood next to him, smiling in that cold way of hers, like she already owned everything Robert and I had spent a lifetime building. That was the moment I realized grief wasn't the only storm I was about to face. But neither of them knew what was coming once the lawyer began reading the will. Their smugness would soon turn into dread. If you find these kinds of raw, true family stories meaningful, please like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Welcome to Grandma Life Stories, where we uncover the hidden battles that happen behind closed doors and the lessons they leave behind. The day of Robert's funeral felt suffocating. Not just because of the heavy Texas sun pressing down on all those black suits and dark dresses, but because of the crushing weight in my chest, the ache words could never explain. For nearly 40 years, Robert and I built our life brick by brick, deal by deal, until we became one of the most respected real estate families in Dallas. $42 million in assets, properties, and legacies, things that were supposed to symbolize not just wealth, but every tear, sacrifice, and sleepless night we had endured together. Yet standing there in the grand Everett estate, with Robert's oak coffin polished to a mirror shine and rows of white lilies lined across the marble hall, I felt emptier than I'd ever felt in my life. Guests filled every corner of the mansion. Business partners, neighbors, distant cousins, whispering in hushed tones, sipping wine, offering condolences that sounded rehearsed. To them, Robert was a giant, a man whose empire shaped Dallas real estate. To me, he was my compass, my steady hand when the ground beneath me shook. My son David, however, didn't grieve the same way. At 38, he carried himself in a way people admired. Tall, confident, charming, at least in public. In the business world, they respected him, but I often saw the truth behind it. His confidence was really recklessness dressed up in nice suits. He had his father's eyes but none of his patience. And standing right beside him was Melissa, his wife of 10 years. 35, polished, sharp-tongued, and ambitious. That ambition always glittered in her smile like the edge of a blade. During the service, Melissa clung to David's arm, not in grief but in quiet triumph, like she'd finally been crowned queen of this empire. While I sat quietly accepting condolences, they moved through the crowd as though they were already the hosts, smiling, whispering promises, shaking hands like they owned the place. It was subtle, but I noticed. And others did too. Some raised their brows as if to say, "Shouldn't this moment belong to Charlotte?" But no one dared say it aloud. By the time the sun dropped behind the estate gates and the last cars rolled away, I stayed in the dining hall, surrounded by flowers already beginning to wilt. Robert's photograph rested on the mantel, his eyes watching me. I whispered to him like he was still there. "Robert, I promise you, I'll protect what we built. I'll guard it with every breath I've got left." When I turned, I caught sight of David across the room. He leaned close to Melissa, his lips barely moving, but I heard him clearly. "It's all ours now." Melissa's smile grew wider, her eyes cutting toward me like a predator sizing up its prey. The words sliced through me like glass. In the days after the funeral, silence filled the Everett mansion. Where Robert's laughter once echoed, there was only the sound of my lonely footsteps. At 59, I had thought my later years would be steady and secure, filled with peace. Instead, I was lost in grief and shadows. David visited often, but never with warmth. He spoke to me with rehearsed tenderness, offering to handle things so I wouldn't stress. Melissa hovered close by, touching papers with her perfectly manicured hands, her voice dripping with concern, but her eyes scanning me for weakness. "You should rest, Mom," David said one evening, laying his hand on mine. "Dad left everything to me anyway. You know he built all of this for me. I'll take care of it. You don't have to worry." Melissa nodded, her words soft but her tone chilling. "Charlotte, you should focus on prayer and peace. Let David handle the empire. He was born for this. You weren't." They wanted their words to soothe me. Instead, they burned like salt on an open wound. To them, I was already irrelevant, too fragile to matter. But they underestimated me. Because while grief had hollowed me out, it hadn't erased who I was. I had built this life with Robert. I had sat in boardrooms, negotiated contracts when his health wavered, sacrifice friendships and dreams to create what now stood in David's hands. And as I watched him puff out his chest and Melissa smirk like she'd finally won, one truth hit me harder than all the rest. This was far from over. That night, the mansion felt colder than ever. The halls that once carried Robert's voice now carried only the ticking of the grandfather clock, heavy and eerie. I wandered the corridor, searching for something, comfort, maybe, or just strength to face another day without him. When I passed the study, I noticed a sliver of light slipping through the oak door. I thought David might be working late. But then I heard them. Voices. Not just voices, his voice low and mocking and hers sharp as glass. I should have walked away. I should have left that door closed. But the cruel edge in their laughter froze me where I stood. David, Melissa whispered slyly. She's fragile now. You've seen it. One little push and she'll lean wherever you want. Smile, hold her hand, pretend you're the dutiful son. She'll sign anything. Whatever paper you put in front of her. David chuckled. Not the laugh of the little boy I once read bedtime stories to. This was arrogant, hard. You're right, he muttered. She's easy prey. She's always hidden behind Dad's shadow. She doesn't know how to run any of this. The second I tell her it's complicated, she'll nod and hand me the pen. My chest tightened like iron. Melissa's voice was steady, confident. We'll draft something clean. She'll think it's routine. And once the lawyer confirms her signature, it's ours. Every property, every cent. She can keep her pearls and her luncheons, but the empire will belong to us. David laughed again. She'll thank me for it. No one listens to a grieving widow anyway. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. My own son, plotting to take everything Robert and I had built. Melissa whispered again, her tone crueler this time. Break her dignity. Remind her she's old. Remind her Robert is gone. Once she feels powerless, she'll surrender it all. David sighed, not with doubt but with pride. She doesn't know I stopped respecting her years ago. To me, she's nothing but a figurehead. Dad tolerated her. I won't. The words cut deeper than any knife could. Memories of his childhood flashed before me. His first steps, his laughter in the backyard, scraped knees and broken bones. I had raised him with love. And now he stood on the other side of that door, tearing apart everything that bound us together. I wanted to burst in, scream his name until the chandeliers rattled. But something inside me whispered to wait. If they thought I was fragile, I'd let them think so. If they believed I was blind, I'd sharpen my eyes. And just before I stepped away, I heard his final words. She'll never see it coming. Mom's weak. She'll fold like paper. And when she does, everything Robert left will finally be mine. Melissa's laugh echoed like poison. I stumbled back, my heart hammering so loud I thought it might give me away. Somehow, I made it to my room before the tears broke. I collapsed against the door, crushed by the weight of his betrayal. Maybe grief had twisted his words, I prayed. Maybe desperation, not malice, had spoken. But deep down I knew better. That wasn't the voice of a mourning son. That was the voice of a man who had already crowned himself king. In the darkness of my room, I clenched my fists and trembled. Not just from sorrow but from the slow birth of something else, resolve. Robert had trusted me to protect what we built, and I knew then I couldn't crumble. I couldn't surrender. If David thought I'd fold into the shadows, he was wrong. Yes, my son betrayed me. Yes, Melissa sharpened his arrogance into a weapon. But they underestimated me. And I swore right then I would make sure they lived to regret it. The next morning, the Everett mansion felt like a stranger's home. Every portrait on the wall stared at me in silence, as if to ask why I was still letting betrayal breathe in these halls. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My hands shook as I tried to pour coffee. So I left. The drive into downtown Dallas was quiet. The sky was cloudless, sharp. The city bustled with its usual energy, but I felt like a ghost among them, like I didn't belong to that world anymore. My heart carried me to only one place, the office of John Hale. John had been Robert's friend for over 30 years. More than just our lawyer, he was like a brother to Robert, a man who knew our family better than anyone. And I knew if anyone could help me protect what was left of my life, it was him. David may have been my son, but in that moment he felt like a stranger. And if there was anyone who could steady me, Anyone who could cut through the fog I was drowning in, it was John. His office sat inside a tall stone building downtown, brass handles gleaming in the sharp morning sun. When I pushed through the doors, the familiar scent of leather and polished wood wrapped around me like an anchor. His secretary, a woman in her 50s with warm, knowing eyes, recognized me instantly. Without hesitation, she guided me straight inside. John stood when he saw me. His hair was more silver than brown now, but his frame was strong as ever, his presence grounding. He stepped forward, clasping both my hands with firm steadiness. "Charlotte," he said, his voice carrying both grief and affection, "I was going to call you today. I didn't want to intrude too soon after Robert's passing." My throat tightened, but I managed to nod. "John, I need to know. Did Robert leave anything behind? Something that tells me what I'm supposed to do now?" For a long moment, John studied me with those sharp eyes that always seemed to see more than you wanted them to. Then he motioned for me to sit. His office was lined with shelves that stretched up to the ceiling, rows of law journals stacked neatly, framed photos of his family tucked in between. Lowering his voice, he said slowly, "Yes, Charlotte. Robert left a sealed will. He ordered me not to open it until the formal reading with your family. But he also wrote you a letter, a private note." He anticipated this exact moment. The words hit like thunder. I leaned forward, my hands clutching the armrests. "He knew." John nodded. "Robert suspected David might let greed get the better of him. He trusted you'd need guidance. He wanted to make sure you weren't blindsided." My stomach twisted, sorrow and pride crashing into me at once. Sorrow that Robert doubted his own son. Pride that he trusted me to carry the weight. What did he say in the letter? I whispered. John unlocked a drawer and pulled out an envelope, the paper yellowed just slightly with time. He handed it to me like it was something sacred. "This is yours to keep. But I can tell you the heart of it. Robert wanted David to learn responsibility the hard way. He refused to reward arrogance. He wanted his legacy protected, not devoured." I pressed the envelope to my chest, almost as though it were Robert's hand resting there again. "The will itself will speak clearly," John went on. "But Charlotte, you must be ready. David may fight it. And Melissa? She'll push him to challenge every single word. It could get ugly." I drew in a long breath, feeling the shift stir inside me. Just last night, I was a woman crushed under betrayal. But now, hearing Robert's foresight, holding his words in my hands, I felt strength flicker back to life. "I won't let them destroy what Robert built," I said firmly. "If this is his last wish, then I'll protect it with everything I have." John studied me, relief softening his face. "That's exactly what he hoped you'd say. You're stronger than they realize, Charlotte. That's your advantage." I shook my head slowly. "They think I'm fragile. They think grief makes me blind. But they don't know me. Not really. For years I let Robert take the lead, but I was always listening. I was always learning. And I will not be fooled by my own child." Silence settled between us, broken only by the ticking of the small clock on his desk. Then John leaned forward again. "There's one more thing," he said carefully. "Robert left something symbolic in the will. I can't reveal the details until the reading. But it's designed to test David's character. It won't be what he expects. You need to be ready for his reaction." My grip on the envelope tightened. "Then let him react. But I won't yield. If Robert trusted me to carry this, I'll see it through." A faint smile tugged at John's lips. "Good. Because once that will is opened, there's no going back. The truth will cut deep, and alliances will shift. But remember, Robert's intent wasn't just to punish. He wanted David to learn humility." The words sank in like fire. For the first time since the funeral, my spine straightened. I felt taller. Anchored not by grief but by purpose. I stood, sliding the envelope carefully into my purse. "John, thank you. You've given me more than legal advice. You've given me direction. Whatever storm comes, I'll face it." He rose too, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone, Charlotte. Remember that." When I stepped back into the Dallas streets, the roar of traffic filled the air. But inside me, there was only calm determination. Last night, David's cruelty had broken me. Today, Robert's foresight stitched me back together. As I walked toward my car, only one thought burned clear. If my son wanted war over this estate, then war he would get. And I was ready. The next morning I began the performance. If David and Melissa wanted to believe I was fragile, then I'd let them. At breakfast I let my shoulders sag, my hands tremble slightly as I lifted my teacup. David sat across from me scrolling his phone, Melissa tapping her nails impatiently, as though family meals were a waste of her time. I cleared my throat softly. David, maybe it's time you helped me with some of your father's paperwork. I'm not as strong as I used to be. Just a few things. Nothing serious. Temporary, of course. His head jerked up, eyes sharp, though he quickly covered it with feigned calm. Temporary? What do you mean? Just some minor accounts, I said gently, sliding a small folder across the table. A lake cabin maintenance bill. A shareholder note that needs watching. Simple things. I'm so tired lately. It would be a relief. Melissa's smirk spread instantly. That's a wise decision, Charlotte. You shouldn't burden yourself. David can handle it. He's good with numbers. I lowered my eyes, masking my thoughts behind a faint, weary smile. Inside, I measured every flicker of expression on David's face. He took the folder like it was the first crack in a locked door. Of course, Mom, he said smoothly, his voice dripping with false tenderness. I'll take care of it. You just focus on your health. That word health hung in the air like a knife. Later that day, once they were gone, I drove quietly downtown. Not to Robert's old office at the estate, but to the company headquarters that still bore his name. The staff there, loyal, seasoned, protective, stood as I entered. Mrs. Everett, the finance director said gently, we're so sorry for your loss. I placed my hand over hers. Thank you. I need a favor. From now on, anytime David requests files or financial records, I want a duplicate copy sent directly to me. Quietly. No delays. No questions. Her brows knit, then she nodded firmly. Understood. One by one I spoke to each department head, accounts, real estate, operations. Calm, precise, clear. David would think he was in control, but every decision, every move would echo back to me. I would have eyes in every corner he least expected. That evening, I sat in the garden when they returned. David looked relaxed, confident, like a man who believed the keys were sliding into his hand. Mom, he said casually, I went through those papers. Easy stuff. Nothing you need to worry about anymore. Thank you, son, I whispered, eyes heavy like a woman too tired to fight. Melissa stood behind him, arms folded, triumph glittering in her eyes. See? Things are smoother already. You just needed to let go. I stayed silent. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. For the next week, I kept up the rhythm of my deception. I let David sit at my desk, let him sign off on small checks, let Melissa hover as though she were queen of the empire. And every night when they left, I cross-checked every number, every note, building my case brick by brick. Then came the first real test. One afternoon, I overheard Melissa on the phone in the hallway. Her voice was low, sharp, like glass cutting through fabric. Yes, the Austin Villa, she said. Prime spot. I'll have a buyer lined up before summer. Don't worry, Charlotte won't resist. She barely knows what she signs these days. My chest burned, but I kept walking, careful not to betray that I had heard. That villa wasn't just property. It was Robert's favorite retreat, the place where he taught our granddaughter to fish, where he sat at dusk with a glass of bourbon. To sell it would be to erase him. That evening at dinner, David cleared his throat. Mom, Melissa and I think it's time to sell the Austin property. Too much for you to manage. Melissa leaned in, her eyes glinting. It's for the best, Charlotte. It just sits empty. We could reinvest the money somewhere useful. I set my fork down, pulse hammering, but kept my face calm, lips trembling just enough to look fragile. If you think it's wise, then perhaps draw up the details. I trust you. David's grin flashed before he swallowed it. I'll handle it. Don't worry. Inside, I made a silent vow. They will not touch it. That night, I wrote in my private ledger, Austin Villa block sale at all costs. The act was working. David believed I was fading. Melissa grew bolder, speaking of assets as though they were hers already. And all the while I documented, prepared, waited. Because while they schemed, I was laying the foundation to strike. Inside the house, David brushed past me in the hallway. His face lit up with reckless energy. "Big things are coming, Mom," he said, his voice buzzing. "Bigger than you've ever imagined. One day you'll thank me." I stopped him with a steady look. "David, remember this. Every empire built too fast collapses twice as hard." He laughed, shaking his head. "That's your problem. You don't think big enough. Leo understands. Melissa understands. You don't." And then he walked away. Alone in the silence, I pressed my hand against Robert's portrait on the wall. "They think I'm powerless," I whispered. "But they have no idea who they're playing with." I thought David's arrogance had already reached its peak. I was wrong. The following week he began carrying a thick folder into every meeting. Dawson embossed across the cover in gold. First I assumed it was just his notes. But then whispers reached me he wasn't just talking. He was showing people something. At a dinner with 2 of our board advisors I saw it myself. He spread a clean cream-colored sheet of paper across the table. The kind of stock our lawyers use for drafts. And across the top, bold and unmistakable, were the words, "Last Will and Testament of Robert Everett." My stomach clenched. With steady, rehearsed confidence, David spoke. "Of course, nothing is official until the reading next week. But this was my father's intent. His signature is right there. He wanted me to carry Everett Enterprises into its next phase. And I owe it to him to act quickly before opportunities slip away." The advisors nodded, reassured. Not one of them noticed or cared that the page lacked a seal, a stamp, any sign of legal completion. To their eyes it looked legitimate. And for them it was enough. Later that night, I confronted him in the hallway. "David, what did I just see?" I demanded. He didn't flinch. "A draft, Mom. A draft that reflects Dad's wishes. You can fight me all you want, but this company needs a leader willing to act. Investors don't wait for ceremonies. They want continuity now." "It's not proof," I shot back. "It's a forgery." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "It's persuasion. Don't confuse the two. The paper itself wasn't the danger. The danger was how he wielded it." At one meeting with bankers, I overheard him presenting his pitch. Gone was the desperate air. He spoke like a CEO mid-transition. His words polished and chillingly confident. "We're restructuring and diversifying the Everett portfolio post-transition," he said smoothly. "This is a generational phase. That means reallocation of capital, fresh partnerships, strategic investments. We're not just inheriting. We're innovating." I watched the bankers lean in. Framed as Everett Enterprises, it sounded invincible. Not David Everett begging for capital, but a dynasty securing its future. Melissa chimed in, her voice dripping with confidence. "What you're seeing here is generational succession at its finest. The market trusts stability, and Everett Enterprises embodies exactly that." Together, they staged a performance that made David look unstoppable. But I knew better. I managed to glance at one of the agreements he brought home. It wasn't a contract. It was a letter of intent, harmless at first glance. But buried in the clauses was poison. Party B agrees to reserve exclusive rights to participate in the Everett investment project for 30 days. In exchange, Party A will deposit an earnest sum of X dollars within 10 business days following the probate hearing. Should Party A fail, a breakup fee equal to 15% of the project value shall be due immediately. 15% of $25 million. Nearly $4 million, money that would never return. He was gambling with liabilities he didn't even own yet. And worse, every document bore Robert's name as collateral. One evening, I entered the study and found David drafting emails at Robert's old desk. Melissa hovered at his shoulder, scrolling through numbers on a tablet. "No one needs reassurance," she murmured. "He wants to know the funds will clear after probate." David didn't hesitate. "Tell him the money's as good as delivered. This is Everett Enterprises. We don't default." I cut in from the doorway. "You mean you don't default yet?" They both spun toward me. "You're walking a thin line," I warned. "Making promises with assets you don't control. Waving a draft will in people's faces like it's scripture. Do you know what happens if someone sues?" David's jaw tightened. "Mom, don't undermine me in front of Melissa." You keep living in fear, but I'm building. Dad would want boldness. Melissa's smile turned almost sweet. He's right, Charlotte. The world rewards decisiveness. You clinging to procedure only makes him look stronger. I stared at them both, arrogance feeding arrogance, and felt Robert's portrait looming heavy above us. Within days, rumors were rippling through the market. Everett Enterprises was restructuring, shifting into hospitality, leveraging assets for growth. Some believed, others doubted, but everyone was talking. Behind it all were David's staged documents and hollow assurances. At a luncheon in Fort Worth, I watched him stand at the head of a long oak table, investors flanking both sides. He held up that draft will like a banner. My father's final wish was continuity, he declared. He built this empire for me to take forward. We're not waiting on bureaucracy. We're moving now. You have 30 days of exclusivity to secure your place. After that, the door closes. The room buzzed with excitement. One man asked, "And what if the funds delay?" David smiled, practiced and sharp. "Impossible. Everett doesn't delay. We honor commitments." That was the moment I realized he wasn't bluffing anymore. He believed his own lies. That night, I sat alone in Robert's study. The faint scent of his cologne lingered in the air. His books, his papers, his presence pressed all around me. I reached for the box of letters he left behind, my hands shaking as I untied the string. Inside were envelopes, his handwriting firm and unwavering. I opened one under the lamp's dim glow. His words cut like steel. If David falls into greed, let him taste the consequences. Only then will he learn. Robert, I whispered into the silence. I'll see this through. I read the letter twice. 3 times. Each line was proof he had known. He had predicted this very spiral. He had prepared me, armed me. I laid the letter aside and opened another folder stacked nearby. Not personal letters this time, company records. Financial documents. And what I found made my chest tighten. Payments duplicated. Vendors billed twice. Shell companies siphoning money. Numbers that didn't align. Signatures traced sloppy. Page after page, and in the margins, David's initials bold, almost proud. I slammed the file shut, rage burning in my throat. He hadn't just become reckless after Robert's death. He had been reckless all along. The next morning I called John. When he arrived, his eyes narrowed at the spread of papers across the desk. "Where did you find these?" he asked. "Buried under Robert's old files," I said. "Hidden but not gone. Look, same vendor, 3 invoices, same amount, same date. That's not a mistake." John leaned closer. "And here, see this? That signature isn't the CFO's. It's traced." My heart pounded. So, he was draining us even before Robert passed. John let out a low whistle. "Charlotte, this isn't incompetence. This is deliberate." I pressed my palms to the desk. "We need proof that will hold in a boardroom. If David waves that fake will, we need something heavier." John nodded. "Then we'll track every irregular payment. Build a timeline. Once it's mapped, no one will be able to deny it." That afternoon we sat in the downtown office, combing through access logs, emails, transaction records. Piece by piece the pattern grew clearer. I scrolled through David's correspondence, his tone cocky and careless. "Push this through. Don't bother Mom with details. Dad always said speed matters." I clenched my fists. He was twisting Robert's words into a shield for theft. John slid another file across the table. "Look." He signed an LOI with Brahman weeks before Robert's death. He was positioning himself before probate. He didn't even wait for his father's body to be cold. The reality cut deep. My son had been planning this all along. As the sun sank behind the skyline, John leaned back. "Charlotte, you have enough to corner him. But the question is, when?" I looked at Robert's letters, his words echoing in my mind. "Let him taste the consequences." "Not yet," I said firmly. "If I strike now, he'll spin it as me resisting change. No, we wait until he hangs himself with his own rope. Then we tighten the knot." John's eyes searched mine. "That'll take patience." "Patience," I said coldly, "is all I have left." That night, back in Robert's study, my hands no longer trembled. Fear had hardened into something sharper, clarity. Robert, I whispered to the empty room, I'll carry this to the end, not for revenge but because David must learn. He must rebuild, not on stolen ground but on his own. I closed the box of letters, locked it, and switched off the lamp. The silence around me was heavy, but it was no longer suffocating. It was the silence before a storm, and I was ready to bring it. The day of the will reading arrived. The Everett estate felt colder than I had ever known. The long library, with its towering shelves and curtains drawn against the sun, had been transformed into a courtroom. The air was thick, suffocating. I sat at the center of the mahogany table, posture straight, face calm, my heart steady but shielded. To my right sat John Hale, expression unreadable, his papers neatly stacked before him. Across from me were David and Melissa. He squared his shoulders with false confidence, chin tilted high. Melissa leaned close, whispering in his ear with a smug smile. To them this was a formality, a rubber stamp before the floodgates opened in their favor. I watched their arrogance the way one watches a storm gather over calm water. John cleared his throat and the room hushed. His voice carried authority, deliberate and measured. By order of the late Robert Everett, I am tasked with reading his final will and testament. This document has been verified, sealed, and will be entered into probate effective today. David rolled his eyes, muttering loud enough for me to hear. Yes, let's move it along. Melissa smirked at his impatience. John didn't flinch. He began with the standard provisions: donations to longtime employees, bequests to charities, instructions for the care of certain properties. David tapped his fingers against the table. Melissa sighed as if bored. Finally, John adjusted his glasses and turned to the final section. The atmosphere shifted. Even David sat up straighter, waiting for the words he believed would crown him. John's tone sharpened. When John's voice shifted to the matter of Everett Enterprises and the estate in its entirety, assets, properties, accounts, I saw David lean back with a smug grin. Melissa squeezed his arm like the queen of a kingdom she believed was already hers. But John's next words hit like thunder. Robert Everett hereby appoints his wife, Charlotte Everett, as the sole heir and primary executive of his estate. She shall assume the role of chairwoman of the Everett Enterprises board with full authority to act in his stead. The silence was deafening. David's smirk shattered in an instant. His jaw clenched, the color drained from his face. Melissa's hand slipped from his arm, her mouth falling open. John didn't pause. His tone was steady, unwavering. Furthermore, it is Robert Everett's express wish that his son, David Everett, inherit a trust fund in the amount of $100,000. This fund is conditional upon demonstrable employment, responsible financial conduct, and the abstention from misusing the Everett name for personal gain. The fund will be administered by Charlotte Everett at her discretion. The air froze solid. My hands remained still on the table, but inside, I felt the full weight of Robert's foresight. David shot to his feet, his chair screeching across the floor. His face burned crimson. "This is fraud," he roared, his voice cracking. "I built this too. I kept this family name alive when Dad was gone. When Mom was—" He stopped, glaring at me, fury trembling in his jaw. "You can't expect me to believe he'd cut me off for a pathetic $100,000. This is my company. My inheritance." Melissa's eyes filled with tears, not grief but pure rage. "This is absurd." Robert adored David. He would never do this. He trusted him more than anyone. John's response was cool, precise. Robert knew exactly what he was doing. These arrangements were made long before his illness grew worse. This was his final test. To see if David would act with responsibility, or let greed consume him. Sadly, David, you've answered that question already. David's fists clenched at his sides. His voice was raw, shaking. "This is your doing, Mother. You poisoned him against me. You filled his head with lies." I let his fury hang in the air. Then I met his eyes, my own voice sharp as glass. "I didn't need to poison anything. Your actions screamed louder than I ever could. The fake papers, the reckless deals, the arrogance. Your father saw it all." Melissa slammed her hand on the table. "Don't think you've won. This isn't over. David will contest this. He'll drag you through court until you're ruined." John cut her off, his tone like a gavel. He can try. But this will is airtight. It was notarized, witnessed, and sealed by the court. Contesting it will drag every one of David's questionable decisions into the light. Are you ready for that level of scrutiny? Melissa's face paled. David turned away, his chest heaving, his bravado cracking into something far more dangerous: fear. I held his gaze steady as stone. Your father wanted you to stand on your own feet, David. Not to live off his shadow. Not to twist his legacy into your playground. He left you something, but he left you a lesson first. If you can't learn it, then the money means nothing. And neither will the Everett name. David slumped into his chair, his head in his hands. Melissa whispered furiously in his ear, but he didn't respond. His shoulders shook, not from grief, but from rage he no longer knew how to unleash. John closed the folder with finality. The reading is concluded. Charlotte, as executor, all further proceedings are under your authority. I nodded once. Thank you, John. When I rose, I felt Robert's presence at my back. This wasn't just victory. It was justice. But the moment wasn't over. David exploded, his voice shattering the quiet. This is fake. He slammed his palm on the table so hard the papers rattled. You manipulated him, Mother. You poisoned him against me. You turned him into your puppet. Melissa tried to calm him, clutching his arm. Please, David, not now. He shoved her away, pointing at me with shaking fingers. You wanted this, didn't you? You sat at his side, whispering poison, turning him against his only son. John sat back, his calm demeanor making David's tantrum look even smaller. I tilted my head slightly. Are you finished? Not even close, David spat. He yanked a thick stack of papers from his briefcase, bound in red. His hand trembled. Not with weakness but eagerness. This, he declared, holding it high, is the real will. The draft father wrote before you got to him. This is what he truly wanted. Melissa's eyes lit with desperate hope. Yes, David, show them. Show them the truth. I stayed still. My voice cut sharp. Then present it. At my signal, the doors opened. Members of the Everett Enterprises board entered, followed by key investors. Their eyes swept over the tense scene, expressions hard and questioning. David froze as he realized the audience had multiplied. But his pride carried him forward. He thrust the stack out for all to see. This proves Father wanted me in charge, he declared. He knew I was the only one capable. Gasps rippled around the room. Investors leaned forward, murmuring. I spoke with precision. Tell me, David, is this the same document you waved before these investors? The one you used to push them into signing letters of intent? A man in a gray suit stiffened. Yes, that's the one. He claimed it was binding, pressed us to sign quickly. A woman beside him added, her tone icy. He assured us it was final. He lied. David's smile faltered. That's right, because it's true. Father wanted me in charge. This is proof. I turned to John. John rose slowly, already holding a folder. His voice was crisp. The document David holds is a discarded draft, superseded months before Robert Everett signed his final will. It has no legal standing. He paused, letting the silence sharpen. But David used that worthless draft to solicit agreements, letters of intent, binding contracts with termination penalties. The total exposure is nearly $4 million. The room erupted. Investors leapt to their feet, furious voices colliding. $4 million, one shouted. You tricked us into liabilities. Melissa's face drained. She looked at David as though she'd never seen him before. David stumbled, his voice breaking. No, that's not right. I was protecting the company, securing capital. John's voice cut clean through him. With forged authority. And we have documents showing you signed loan applications using your mother's name as guarantor. That is fraud, David. Criminal fraud. Gasps sliced through the air. Every eye turned to me, then back to him. David's jaw fell open, his face a mask of panic. She's lying. You're all lying. This is a setup. I stood slowly, my voice low but final. No, David. Your father's will didn't strip you of power. You did. You didn't inherit a company, you manufactured a debt. You didn't protect his legacy. You endangered it. And now the truth has caught you. Melissa's voice trembled. You promised me, David. You said everything was guaranteed. He turned to her in desperation. Melissa, listen. But she pulled away, her tears for herself, not him. The board members rose, their anger filling the room. Unacceptable. Malpractice. One shouted. John raised his hand, commanding silence. Mrs. Everett will assume the chairmanship as stipulated. But let there be no doubt. David Everett's actions have placed this company at risk. It will be addressed fully. The focus shifted away from me and squarely onto David. He sagged in his chair, humiliation heavy on his shoulders. Melissa no longer looked like his ally. She looked like his accuser. I leaned forward, my voice ablaze. You wanted to prove yourself, David, and you did. You proved to everyone here that greed and deception are your true inheritance. Not Everett Enterprises. The silence that followed was absolute. When the last guest left, the grand room fell still. Only David remained, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with humiliation. I didn't gloat. Victory had no sweetness when it came at the cost of a son. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. Robert's handwriting, steady and unmistakable, covered the front. Noah, I said evenly. This is from your father. He wrote it for you for this very moment. Suspicion flickered across his face, but his hand reached for it anyway. He ripped the seal, scanned the words, and his expression cracked. His lips quivered. His shoulders slumped. He whispered, barely audible. He knew. Tears filled his eyes. For the first time that day, David didn't look like a man clawing for power. He looked like a boy who had lost his way. His voice broke as he read. My son, power gained without work is a curse. I built not just a company but a trust. A legacy brick by brick. You must learn that building is harder. But it's the only path that gives life meaning. I pray you choose creation over destruction. The letter slipped from his hands. He covered his face, sobbing, raw, broken. I didn't comfort him. I only said firmly, your father didn't want you to fail. He wanted you to learn. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned. You thought you could demand it. That's why you lost everything before you even began. He choked on his own guilt. I just wanted what was mine. It was never yours to take, I said sharply. It was yours to earn. And you never did. The next morning came with a knock at the gates. 2 police officers entered, grim and silent. Behind them stood John Hale, a folder in hand. The taller officer spoke, his voice firm. David Everett, you are under investigation for forgery and fraud. David staggered back, disbelief flooding his face. What? No, this isn't happening. You can't. But he could. And as the officers stepped forward, I felt Robert's presence again. Steady, strong, unbroken. This wasn't vengeance. It was justice. Then came the moment I never thought I'd see. Leo, David's so-called ally, was led through the doorway in handcuffs. His head was bowed, shame written across his face. His voice was low, broken. I told them everything, David. About the fake papers. About how you used your mother's name to secure those loans. I couldn't carry it alone. The blood drained from David's face. His eyes burned with betrayal. You turned on me. Leo didn't look at him. He only whispered. You turned on yourself. The officers read David his rights. He shouted, cursed, fought against the words as though volume could erase truth. But it was useless. The evidence was iron. Anger and denial had no power in that room. I sat on the edge of the sofa, gripping the fabric so tightly my knuckles turned white. My son, my own flesh and blood, was being taken away in disgrace. Tears pricked my eyes, but I held them back. This wasn't pity. This was justice. As they escorted him out, he turned once more, desperation flashing across his face. Mother, please say something. You can stop this. I stood, but my voice was cold, steady. David, I warned you. Your father warned you. We both begged you to stand on your own, not drag everyone else down with you. I will not shield you from the consequences of your own choices. His eyes widened. For a heartbeat, he looked like the frightened little boy who once ran to me for comfort. But then the officers pulled him away, and the house sank into silence once again. I sat back down, my body heavy, my chest tight, and this time the tears came soft and uncontrollable. They weren't tears of triumph. They were a mother's grief, the ache of knowing I had done everything I could, yet still had to watch my son fall. I whispered to Robert's memory, "I didn't want this. I wanted him to change. But maybe this was the only way." The world outside kept moving. Investors regrouped. The company steadied. But for me, time slowed. I thought of David's last look. Rage mixed with despair. I thought of Robert's words in that letter. A father's plea for his son to learn the worth of building instead of taking. Justice had spoken, not through my hands but through David's own mistakes. The Dallas courtroom was colder than winter that morning. The flags hung limp. The gavel sat waiting on the bench like a weapon. I sat in the back, quiet, hands folded, heart braced. This was no longer my fight. Justice had its own stage. David stood before the judge, stripped of his tailored armor. No silk ties, no perfect suit. Just a pale man, restless eyes, shoulders shrunken under the weight of truth. The judge's voice rang sharp. "Mr. David Everett, the court has reviewed the evidence. Your actions constitute forgery, misrepresentation, and financial fraud. The damage done to investors and to this estate cannot be ignored." His lawyer tried to soften the blow with excuses. Youth, pressure, poor judgment. None of it mattered. The truth was carved in stone. The verdict cracked like a whip. Massive fines, mandatory restitution, permanent blacklisting from corporate authority. And then came the strike that broke him. "You will no longer be recognized as a lawful trustee of the Everett estate." David staggered as though struck. His lips parted but no sound came. Melissa sat 2 rows ahead. Through the trial she'd worn her mask of poise, but the cracks were showing. When the sentence landed, she didn't reach for his hand. She stood, her heels echoing as she walked out, the door slamming louder than the gavel itself. "Amy, wait." David's voice cracked in desperation. But she never turned. Reporters scribbled, investors muttered, strangers averted their eyes. Disgrace clung to him like a stench. When the room emptied, I approached. He sat slumped on the bench, hands shaking, tie loose, a shadow of the man he once pretended to be. "Mother," he whispered, broken. "They've ruined me." I held his gaze. "No, David. You ruined yourself. They only held up the mirror." He shook his head, eyes red. "Melissa's gone. The company's gone. My name, everything. What am I supposed to do now?" I didn't answer. Some questions carry no comfort, only truth. The weeks that followed were merciless. The press had a feast. Headlines branded him as a fraud, a fallen heir. Photos showed him leaving court bent under flashing cameras. Friends vanished. Invitations evaporated. Melissa filed for separation, left for New York, and reclaimed her maiden name. She sold his gifts and never spoke his name again. The real punishment wasn't just financial. It was exile. Months later, I saw him again. Not in a courtroom but at a tiny coffee shop. I spotted him through the window, hunched over a laptop, clothes plain, face gaunt. Just another man in the crowd. When I entered, he froze. Shame flooded his features. "Mother," he stammered. "I didn't think you'd ever want to see me again." "I didn't come for you," I said honestly. But then I sat across from him. "Since I am here, I'll say this: you're still breathing. That means you still have choices." His voice was a whisper. "I've lost everything. I'm nothing now." I leaned closer. "You were nothing when you thought everything belonged to you. Now, stripped of it all, maybe you can become something real." His eyes brimmed, his voice cracked. "I don't even know where to start." "Start where everyone else starts," I told him. "From the bottom. You wanted to be a builder, then build. Not with stolen trust, but with your own hands. Brick by brick if you have the strength." For a long time he said nothing. But then, just barely, he nodded. The months turned into years. I heard fragments. He rented a small apartment, sold what was left of his luxuries, and took a job with a logistics firm, not as a director but as an assistant. He carried boxes, drove deliveries, filed paperwork. For the first time, his work was honest. Neighbors said he kept to himself. No parties, no grand gestures. Sometimes they saw him sitting outside with a notebook, scribbling like he was sketching out a future no one would hand him. It wasn't redemption. But it was a start. 3 years passed. One afternoon I walked into a small office tucked between a laundromat and a hardware store. The faded sign above read, Everett Logistics Services. Inside, David sat at a cramped desk, shirt sleeves rolled up, hands roughened by work. No assistants, no grandeur, just numbers in a ledger and a man who finally knew the weight of sweat. When he saw me, he froze. For a moment that old arrogance flickered, but it vanished. He stood quietly, voice steady. "Mother," he said. I nodded. "You're working?" "Yes," he answered simply. Then after a pause added, "It's not much. Deliveries, paperwork, invoices. But it's mine. And I'm learning." His tone wasn't defensive. It was honest. And for once that was enough. Ethan, his boy, was 14 by then, tall, bright-eyed, brimming with energy. He came to me often, filling the house with laughter. One evening, he burst in carrying a notebook of sketches. "Grandma," he grinned, "one day I'll build a company, bigger than Dad ever dreamed. But not the wrong way. I'll build something that makes you proud." I put my hand over his. "Do it with honesty, Ethan. That's the only way it lasts." His eyes burned with sincerity. He nodded like he just signed a vow. Life didn't erase David's mistakes. His name remained tainted in Dallas society. But slowly he carved out something smaller, humbler, real. And though I never offered him forgiveness outright, I knew this much. Robert's lesson had been delivered. One evening I sat in my garden, the twilight settling soft and deep. Ethan had just left, his words still echoing. "I'll make you proud." I closed my eyes and whispered to Robert. I gave him a chance, not forgiveness, not indulgence. A chance. And he stands now, not mocking, not taking, but working. That was your wish, wasn't it? That he learned the worth of sweat over shortcuts. The weight lifted just enough. The garden darkened. The stars pressed against the sky. I sat there alone but not lonely. For the first time in years I allowed myself to hope.